At dinner with my parents, she said, "Your son's sweet, but I'm still exploring my options," while holding my hand. I let go, stood up and said, "We should go." While my parents watched her in shock, I drove her home without a word. While she was trying to explain at her door, I said, "You're free to explore now," and left. The dashboard clock glowed 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes early. I adjusted the bottle of Pinot Grigio on the passenger seat, Dad's favorite, and glanced at Melissa. She was scrolling through Instagram, the blue light casting sharp angles across her face. A video of some lifestyle influencer flickered past, all perfect teeth and manufactured enthusiasm. "You ready for this?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet car. "Yeah, totally," she said, without looking up, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "Just let me check this one thing." I watched her for a moment. We'd been seeing each other for 12 months now, and lately she'd been distant, distracted. When I'd asked about it last week, she'd wave me off with a laugh. "Just work stuff, Lucas. The Henderson wedding is consuming my life. You know how brides get." I believed her. I always believed her. I'd spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment, imagining tonight going perfectly. After dessert, I planned to bring up making things official. We were already exclusive, had been for months, but neither of us had used the word girlfriend yet. At 33, I was past playing games. My logic was sound. We spent most weekends together. She had a drawer at my place, and my parents adored her from their previous meetings. It was time to move forward. The drive to my childhood home had become familiar over the past year. Melissa had joined me for family barbecues, holiday celebrations, even helped my mom plant her garden last spring. She fit seamlessly into our family dynamic, charming my parents with stories from her event planning career, and always remembering to ask about Dad's golf game and Mom's book club. "Okay, let's go," Melissa said finally, dropping her phone into her designer purse with a theatrical sigh. She offered me a smile that seemed slightly off-center, like a picture hanging crooked on a wall. The walk to my childhood home felt normal enough. The same lemony polish smell greeted us at the door, mixed with slow-cooked pot roast and the comforting scent of old books. My mom, Carol, wrapped me in her familiar hug, before turning to Melissa with genuine warmth. "You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. That dress is perfect on you." "Thanks, Carol," Melissa replied, her social charm clicking into place like a well-rehearsed performance. She handed over the wine with a practiced smile. "This is for you and Dan. Lucas mentioned you love this vineyard." My dad emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel that had seen countless family dinners. A firm handshake for me, a warm squeeze for Melissa. "The chef is almost ready. For his audience," he announced with mock grandeur, "make yourselves comfortable, you two." We settled into the living room, the good crystal glasses catching the light from the old lamp my grandmother had left us. Sinatra played softly from the stereo Dad had owned since before I was born, the same one that had provided the soundtrack to my childhood. It was exactly the scene I'd imagined when I pictured introducing someone special to my parents. Melissa sat close to me on the familiar sofa, her leg pressed against mine, and I felt my earlier anxiety begin to dissolve. See? Everything was fine. Everything was exactly as it should be. Dinner was Dad's famous pot roast, a recipe he'd perfected over 20 years of Sunday dinners. Carrots and potatoes cooked to buttery perfection, gravy that could solve most of life's problems. The conversation flowed easily, a gentle rhythm of shared stories and comfortable laughter that had developed over the months of Melissa being part of these gatherings. Dad asked about the new loan processing system at the bank, genuinely interested in the technical challenges I faced as a credit analyst. Mom inquired about Melissa's latest project, a charity gala she was coordinating for a local children's hospital. "It's going to be incredible," Melissa said, her hands dancing through the air as she spoke. "We've got this silent auction item, a weekend at a ski lodge in Vermont. The donor is this tech entrepreneur who made millions selling his startup. I'm honestly tempted to bid on it myself." She laughed, and my parents laughed with her. She was radiant, magnetic. The center of attention in the best possible way, but not in a way that diminished anyone else at the table. I simply watched, content to orbit around her energy, proud that this brilliant, accomplished woman had chosen to spend her time with me. For 12 months, she'd been part of my life, part of my family's life. The conversation meandered through familiar territory. Dad's latest golf tournament, Mom's book club's passionate debate over their current selection, my recent promotion to senior analyst. Normal, comfortable, domestic. The kind of evening that felt like a preview of a lifetime of such evenings. Then Mom poured more wine and asked the question I'd been hoping for, the question that would give me the perfect opening for my carefully planned transition into our future. "So, you two," she began, her voice warm with curiosity and genuine affection. "We don't want to pry, but any big plans on the horizon? You both seem so wonderfully settled together. It's been such a joy watching your relationship grow this past year." It was the perfect opening. My heart did a small skip of anticipation. I felt Melissa's hand find mine under the table, her fingers cool against my palm. I took it as a sign of solidarity, a signal that we were thinking the same thing, that we were ready to take this step together. I opened my mouth to deliver my carefully considered response, but Melissa spoke first. She leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on an almost philosophical tone that I'd never heard before. "You know, Carol, that's such a great question." She paused, looking from my mom to my dad, then down at our joined hands resting on the tablecloth. She gave my hand what I would later recognize as a patronizing little pat. "Lucas is honestly the sweetest man I've ever known. Truly, so kind, so stable," she said, pronouncing stable like it was a chronic medical condition that required careful management. "He's like a perfect cozy fireplace." I felt something cold begin to trickle down my spine, a premonition that the evening was about to shift in ways I couldn't anticipate. She continued, her gaze drifting toward the window, as if seeing a more exciting world beyond the glass, beyond the comfortable domesticity of this dining room where we'd shared so many meals. "But I'm just at a point in my life where I need to be absolutely sure about everything. I'm still young, well, youngish." She let out a tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "I feel like I owe it to myself to keep exploring my options. You understand, right?" The world didn't shatter. It didn't go dark. Instead, it became hyper-focused, crystalline in its brutal clarity. I could see individual flecks of pepper in the gravy on my plate. I could see the slow, horrified collapse of my mother's smile, the way it crumpled like a flower wilting in fast forward. I could see my father's fork freeze halfway to his mouth, a piece of carrot balanced precariously on the tines, trembling slightly with his suppressed shock. I felt the weight of Melissa's hand on top of mine, suddenly heavy, foreign, like a dead thing that had somehow attached itself to me. Exploring my options. The words hung in the air like toxic smoke, mingling with the scent of gravy and the ghost of my shattered expectations. She had just told my parents, the two people who loved me most in this world, that their son was a temporary placeholder, a nice, safe harbor while she shopped for a more exciting destination. A practice relationship before the real thing came along. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the faint sound of "The Way You Look Tonight" drifting from the living room stereo. The irony of it hit me like a physical blow. The way you look tonight. As if this moment, this betrayal, was somehow beautiful. I looked down at our hands. Her slim, manicured fingers lay over my broader ones, the same hands that had held mine during movies, intertwined with mine during walks, traced patterns on my chest during lazy Sunday mornings. A public display of affection that had, in that moment, become the most violent act of disrespect I had ever experienced. Calmly, without a word, I slid my hand out from under hers. The sound of my chair scraping against the hardwood floor was a gunshot in the quiet room. I stood up, my movements feeling mechanical, precise, as if I were following a script I'd never read but somehow knew by heart. I looked at my parents, my mother's eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. My father's face a mask of stone, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working beneath his skin. "We should go," I said. My voice was flat, alien even to my own ears. It held no anger, no tremor, no emotion whatsoever. It was simply a statement of fact, like announcing the weather. I walked around the table and pulled out Melissa's chair for her, one final automatic act of courtesy that my parents had drilled into me since childhood. She stared up at me, her confident expression finally cracking into confusion, like watching a carefully constructed facade develop its first hairline fractures. "Lucas, what are you—" "We're leaving," I repeated, not looking at her. I met my dad's eyes across the table. In that moment, we shared something wordless and profound, and understanding, a transfer of dignity from father to son, a recognition that sometimes the most powerful response is the quietest one. He gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. I guided Melissa, now flustered and silent, from her chair. I collected her purse from the sideboard, where she'd left it next to my grandmother's antique serving tray. I couldn't look at my mom. I couldn't bear to see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, the maternal instinct to somehow fix this unfixable moment. "Thank you for dinner," I said to the space between them, my voice maintaining that same eerily calm tone. "It was excellent, as always." And then I led what remained of my relationship out of my parents' house, leaving the ruins of my imagined future cooling on the dining room table alongside the pot roast and mashed potatoes. The cold February air hit us like a physical blow. The temperature had dropped while we were inside, and our breath came in visible puffs as we walked to my car. Melissa finally found her voice as I unlocked the doors. "Lucas, stop! What was that?" "You're being completely ridiculous." I didn't answer. I got behind the wheel and started the engine, letting it idle while she stood on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. After a moment of apparent internal debate, she yanked the passenger door open and slid in. "Are you serious right now?" she demanded, confusion rapidly morphing into indignation. "You just dragged me out of there because of one little comment?" I pulled out of my parents' driveway, taking one last look at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd brought the woman I thought I'd marry to share countless meals with the people who'd raised me. The porch light cast long shadows across the front yard, and I could see my parents' silhouettes in the dining room window, probably sitting in stunned silence at the table we'd just abandoned. "It wasn't a little comment, Melissa," I said, my voice maintaining that terrifyingly calm monotone as I navigated the familiar streets of my neighborhood. "Oh my God, you are so sensitive," she exploded, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "I was just being honest with them. I was being real. Isn't that what you're always saying you want? Honesty?" The word tasted like ash in the air between us. "Honesty," I repeated, not as a question but as a concept I was examining, turning over in my mind like a stone I'd never really looked at before. "Yes, I was telling them the truth. I do love you, Lucas. You know I do. But love isn't always enough, is it? There's a whole world out there. I have needs, curiosities. Is it a crime to want to be absolutely sure before making a major life decision?" I signaled a turn, the mechanical click of the blinker, the loudest sound in the world. The familiar streets of Columbus passed by in the darkness, the coffee shop where we'd had our first date, the park where we'd walked countless times, the movie theater where she'd fallen asleep during a film I'd been excited to share with her. "So, I'm an experiment," I said. It wasn't an accusation or a question. It was simply a conclusion, stated with the same emotional flatness I might use to read a weather report. "No, don't put words in my mouth. You're not an experiment. You're my foundation. But even foundations need to be tested, right? To make sure they can handle what's being built on them." The metaphor was so staggeringly selfish that it almost broke through my numbness. Almost. She had just compared 12 months of my emotional investment, my vulnerability, my genuine love, to a building inspection. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white in the glow of the dashboard lights. "You humiliated me," I said quietly. "In front of my parents. You reduced a year of my life to a trial run. I did not. You're catastrophizing this completely. They adore me. They understood exactly what I meant. You're just choosing to be hurt, because you're terrified of anything that doesn't fit into your perfect, planned-out little life." And there it was. The floodgates opened, and for the next 15 minutes, she spun an elaborate web of justification, self-pity, and veiled insults disguised as concern for my emotional growth. "You're taking this completely the wrong way. I just meant I need to experience more of life before I settle down. And you're so content. It's not about you, it's about me wanting to grow as a person. Can't you see this is healthy? This is how modern relationships work. You're so sweet, Lucas, but sweetness can be passive. Maybe this is good for both of us. Maybe you need to explore too, to figure out what you really want. The words washed over me like white noise. I drove in silence, letting every syllable settle into the growing ice in my chest. This was who she was. This had always been who she was. I had just been too comfortable by the metaphorical fireplace to feel the draft. We reached her apartment building, a converted warehouse in the arts district that she'd chosen because it was authentic and spoke to her creative soul. I pulled into a visitor spot and put the car in park, letting the engine idle. The silence that followed was heavy, saturated with her spent rhetoric and my crystallizing understanding. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for a response. A fight, tears, begging, something she could work with, twist, or dominate. Some emotional reaction she could use as leverage to maintain control of the narrative. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out. I walked around the car and opened her door. One final, reflexive act of courtesy that I would never perform for her again. She stepped out, searching my face for some crack in my composure, some sign that she could still manipulate this situation to her advantage. "Lucas, talk to me. Please, don't be like this." I looked at her then, really looked at the woman I'd thought I might build a future with. I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no anger. Just a vast, empty clarity, like looking through perfectly clean glass. She took a step toward me, reaching out to touch my arm with the same hand that had patted mine so condescendingly an hour earlier. I took a deliberate step back, out of her reach. Her eyes widened slightly. That was the first thing that truly seemed to scare her. My physical withdrawal, done with calm, purposeful intent. I met her gaze, my voice quiet and utterly clean of emotion. "You're free to explore now." I turned, got back into my car, and closed the door with the soft thunk of German engineering. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing on the curb, frozen, one hand still slightly outstretched toward where I had been. I didn't wait to see if she moved. I drove away, and with every block, the weight in the car seemed to lessen until it was just me, the road, and a silence that was no longer filled with her justifications, but with a profound, emerging peace. The silence in my apartment that night was different. Before, it had been a passive thing, a space waiting to be filled with the sound of her key in the lock, her laughter, her commentary on everything from my movie choices to the way I loaded the dishwasher. Now it was active, purposeful. It belonged to me. I didn't break down. I didn't throw things. I stood in the middle of my living room, still wearing the dress shirt I'd put on with such optimism hours earlier, and simply breathed. The numbness felt like protection, a cocoon where something quiet and decisive was rebuilding itself. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Mom." "Lucas, honey, are you—" "I'm okay, Mom," I said, cutting her off gently. My voice sounded surprisingly normal, steady. "It's over." A pause filled with a mother's wordless anguish, the sound of someone trying to find the right words for an impossible situation. What she said at our table? "I know," I said. "Please, I just need to not talk about it right now." "Okay," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "We love you. We're here when you're ready." I hung up and immediately performed what felt like emergency surgery. I opened my phone and navigated to Melissa's contact. The photo showed her laughing at a coffee shop during our third date, a moment I now knew was just another scene in her ongoing audition for something better. I blocked her number, then Instagram, Facebook, Venmo, LinkedIn, Spotify. Every digital connection severed in under 3 minutes. I wasn't angry. I was decontaminating, removing a toxin from my system with clinical precision. The first night, I slept like the dead. The second night, I woke at 3 a.m. with her words playing on a crystal-clear loop, exploring my options. I saw my father's frozen fork, my mother's shattered smile, the patronizing pat of her hand. I let the humiliation wash through me without fighting it, observing it like a scientist studying a toxic sample under a microscope. By dawn, it was cataloged, analyzed, and spent. I didn't call in sick. I went to work, processed loan applications, attended meetings, ate lunch at my desk. The world kept turning. My hands still knew the keyboard. My mind could still untangle complex financial problems. This was a relief I hadn't expected. The discovery that heartbreak doesn't actually stop the machinery of daily life. The real work began after hours. I joined a gym, not the casual Planet Fitness I'd use sporadically, but a serious place with heavy iron and people who understood that sometimes you need to move weight to process life. I hired a trainer named Marcus for 3 sessions, just to learn proper form and avoid injury. The first time I deadlifted more than my body weight, my muscles screaming and vision spotting, I thought of her calling me sweet and stable, like character flaws. I locked out the lift, and the crash of the plates hitting the floor was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. I enrolled in an online certification course for advanced financial analysis, something I'd put off for over a year, citing being too busy with relationship stuff. Now, my evenings had a new architecture: gym, study, cook real meals for myself. I learned to make perfect pan-seared salmon and developed an obsession with weekend home improvement projects that actually improved my space rather than just killing time. Weeks bled into months. Spring arrived in Columbus with its usual mixture of hope and pollen. The sharp clarity of that dinner table betrayal softened into a simple, unattractive fact of my personal history, like a scar you forget you have until you catch it in the right light. The first whisper of her downward spiral came through Kevin, my college roommate who still lived in town. We were grabbing beers after a Blue Jackets game when he started fidgeting with his phone, scrolling through social media with obvious discomfort. "Sorry," he said, sliding into the booth. "Got sucked into some drama on Instagram." I raised an eyebrow, sipping my beer and waiting. "Mutual acquaintance," he said carefully, knowing I'd purged my digital life of her entire constellation. "Apparently, Melissa's new situation is intense." I said nothing, but my silence was an open door he could choose to walk through or not. Guy named Brad, some digital marketing guru who sells online courses about passive income and financial freedom, always posting photos from expensive restaurants and luxury car rentals. Kevin watched my face for a reaction. Seems like she found her excitement. I waited, feeling nothing but mild curiosity, like hearing gossip about a stranger. From what I hear through the grapevine, it's been a complete roller coaster. One week they're in Miami posting about living their best life. The next she's crying to friends because he doesn't believe in traditional relationship structures. Her social circle is getting exhausted with the constant drama. I felt a distant ripple, not schadenfreude, but simple recognition. The unstable, flashy bonfire she'd traded her cozy fireplace for was predictably consuming everything around it, just as unstable things do. I said finally. That was it. Kevin laughed, shaking his head. "You really have changed, man." The old Lucas would have been worried, would have asked follow-up questions to make sure she was okay. He was right. That man had died politely at a dinner table 8 months ago. "I'm not responsible for her choices," I said. And it was the simplest, truest thing I'd spoken in a long time. The seasons turned again. I got my certification, earned a promotion to senior analyst, and developed genuine friendships with my gym partners. The silence in my apartment had become a companion rather than a void. I started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and casual dinners that taught me the difference between someone who saw me as a placeholder and someone who saw me as a person worth knowing. Then I met Jenna at a professional conference in Cincinnati. She was a loan officer at a partner bank, someone I'd worked with on joint applications for months before Kevin pointed out that she'd been finding excuses to collaborate on projects. She was intelligent without being performative, kind without keeping score, and when she laughed at something I said, it felt like a discovery rather than a transaction. We'd been seeing each other for 3 weeks when the final collision occurred. It was a Saturday morning at the North Market, Columbus's bustling farmers market. The air smelled of fresh bread, early spring vegetables, and possibility. Jenna was debating the merits of local honey with a vendor while I held our canvas shopping bag, thinking about the simple pleasure of planning meals with someone who genuinely wanted to be there. That's when I felt it, a familiar intensity, like a hand on the back of my neck. I looked up to see Melissa standing 20 feet away near a flower stall, holding an overpriced latte. Like a prop in a performance she was no longer sure how to give. She looked put together, but strained, like a guitar string tuned too tight. Her eyes were fixed on me, then flicked to Jenna, then to our casually intertwined fingers. I watched her perform a complex calculation of loss and regret before she locked her expression into determined confidence and started walking toward us. "Friend of yours?" Jenna asked, sensing my shift in energy. "Someone I used to know," I said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "It's fine." but Melissa was already crossing the space between us, her heels clicking against the concrete floor with the urgency of someone running out of time. She ignored Jenna completely, her focus laser sharp on me with the intensity of someone trying to restart a fire that had gone completely cold. "Lucas," she said, her voice bright with forced casualness that fooled no one. "Hi. Hello, Melissa." An awkward beat. The market swirled around us, laughter, conversations, the sound of a child demanding a cookie from a nearby bakery stall. Normal life continuing while this ghost from my past tried to resurrect what we both knew was already buried. Could we maybe grab a coffee, just to talk? As friends? The words tumbled out, rehearsed but fragile, like lines from a play she'd practiced but never performed. "No," I said. The word wasn't harsh or vindictive. It was simply definitive, like stating that water flows downhill. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, meeting her eyes with genuine neutrality. "But you won't find it with me." I turned toward Jenna, my entire demeanor shifting, warming, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "The bakery with the sourdough is this way, isn't it?" We walked into the crowd, into the sunlight and the smell of fresh bread and growing things. I didn't look back, and after a moment, I no longer felt her gaze following us. There was no victory in it, no satisfaction or lingering sting. There was only the warm reality of Jenna's hand in mine, and the profound understanding that the past was finally just that. A closed chapter in a book I was no longer reading. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in fighting back, but in walking away. Sometimes the deepest love isn't in holding on, but in knowing when to let go.